dress some pity any ass boy. I used to be a fighter, and I still got hands, and I'll knock your...
Get off the wall to dress some pity-itty ass boy. I used to be a fighter, and I still got hands. I knock your shass out, and I shoot you straight out of your head. You didn't want to be a movie star. You couldn't be a movie star because out of the 30,000 new scripts that are written in Hollywood each year, not one of them calls for a black man who is a country bumpkin who can't talk good over and looks like Mr. Potato Head. However, I'm going to shift that weight and turn my hip in order to knock your shot ass out and shoot your perm straight out of your head. It looks like things are going to get heated between Steve Harvey and Katt Williams. In response to Steve's public declaration a few months ago that he would knock him out, Katt recently took offense. Katt made much of Steve's criticism, even going so far as to name Steve in his remarks. At first, Steve didn't seem to mind and didn't reply, but it turns out that he was bothered. Now, more than 7 months later, Steve has finally chosen to speak up and threaten to get physical with Katt if he sees him again. Let's delve deeper into this mess, shall we? Before we do so, though, please make sure to subscribe to our channel and click the bell for more updates and videos like this one. Now, let's get started. Steve Harvey had a few things to say. First, about Katt Williams. Second, about Michael Rubin's talk about the black community. Let's listen to the Katt Williams stuff. You will never have a hater who is doing better than you. You always know that don't get off the wall to dress some pity any boy who ain't got going for himself. Now, you stop your climb up on the wall so you can come down here and talk to his little p. Don't do that, man, as many of you might know. This all began back in January during a heated interview with Shannon Sharpe, where Katt took shots at several comedians including Kevin Hart, Cedric the Entertainer, Ricky Smiley, and of course Steve Harvey, saying that Faison has never done his own tour in 30 years. Katt Williams has never been a fan of Steve Harvey, and he made that pretty clear earlier this year. Steve Harvey has stopped performing stand-up. Cedric is not a writer. I apologize if he doesn't write. Ricky Smiley has been playing the same old black woman for a very long time, but you can't get a young fan base with that. Katt accused Steve of being envious of the late Bernie Mac. He said that Steve was against Bernie while he was alive, but began copying his style after he passed away. Steve was also called a talentless fraud because, despite his previous claims that he wasn't interested in movies, no one wanted him because he was just a Bernie Ma wannabe with no real talent. Katt even said that Steve watched a sitcom with Mark Curry and then stole everything from it. You think I'm let you shun Bernie and then come get me? I'm the next king, you why? Because the entire time Bernie was here, you were acting like you were funnier than him. The reason you were supposed to go last is because they were your tour, Katt said now. In his sitcom, Steve plays a principal who looks great. Everyone thinks he's got the best appearance around, but the high top fade turns out to be a wig. After learning this, Steve wonders why he's not a movie star and says he never wanted to be one. I didn't want to be a movie star. No, you couldn't be a movie star. There are 30,000 new scripts in Hollywood every year, and not one of them asks for a country bumpkin black dude who can't talk well and looks like Mr. Potato Head. There aren't any. You would have to have range. Steve, who once criticized Bernie Mac while copying his style, you were supposed to go last because, in reality, Steve's tour was supposed to be called the Kings of Comedy, but you played a lot of characters in 60 movie roles. So why am I not playing Katt Williams there? Because the entire time Bernie was here, you were acting like you were funnier than him. I'm telling you about the Kings because, well, DL is the greatest and DL slander gets tolerated, but they came to me because I was supposed to be the fourth king. I got the offer then, what happened, but I turned it down. Why? Because you, on Bernie, but C wasn't finished because he accused Steve of lying about being homeless just to get sympathy from people, Katt claims. That's why it was such a big deal. Do you consider yourself a king of comedy? Where does that go? Oh, like, after Bernie left them, the same three guys, this is like Steve Harvey telling people he was destitute once. That's my tale, not his. Steve has never been homeless, and while he was acting like he was down on his luck, he was actually earning up to $3,000 a night touring with Mark Curry. You mentioned your first wife, but you forgot to mention that you told us it was her. Then you married someone else who thought like a man. What are you talking about? They think they can rewrite history the way Steve Harvey tells people he was homeless in the past. That's my story, and that's not his. 25 years ago, when he and Mark Curry were touring, he was earning $3,000 a show in cash and performing 5 shows a week. Did they just tell the stories? When Steve Harvey was on tour with Mark Curry, he was never homeless. When Williams performed a fantastic special about the Comedy Store on Fat Tuesday 25 years ago, he was earning $3,000 per show in cash and claimed that Steve Cedric, the entertainer, Kevin Hart, and Tiffany Haddish had all come through and made false claims. Cedric never appeared at the Comedy Store, and Tiffany was only ever seen at the Laugh Factory. Katt also claimed that Steve had stopped doing stand-up comedy because Katt had severely embarrassed him in front of 10,000 people during a show a few years prior, which had really damaged Steve's ego. They pay you not to talk about things they don't want you to talk about. They tell you that themselves. Steve told you that he stopped doing stand-up because he had 7 TV shows. The only problem is that he didn't have those 7 TV shows when he stopped stand-up because he lost comedy competition called the Championship of Stand-Up Comedy in front of 10,000 people. Williams claimed that Steve is actually bald and that the hair he is wearing is a wig, which is why he was unable to continue doing stand-up. Now, Steve is telling you a different story, saying that the reason he became so famous was because Bernie and other people wanted to be movie stars. However, I turned down because I knew that you were lying to me, thinking that I'll let you on Bernie and then come get me. I'm the next king. You following the interview, a lot of people supported Katt and criticized Steve, labeling him a scammer. It seemed like a classic move for someone trying to divert attention from the real issue. But as I mentioned earlier, people could see through all that, and they went off on him even more like this person who said guilty people usually can't sit idle when the truth about them is added to the public. Steve pretended to be too good to respond directly, so he posted a clip talking about how haters always say the worst things and that it's best not to give them the satisfaction of a reaction. Another person said, "I'm not going to address the haters," to which Steve replied, "I don't address haters." Then for the next 2 minutes, Steve addressed the haters, saying a lot of nothing and accusing them of being snakes to Bernie. If he hadn't been aware of what had been said, an innocent person would have used the code silence. Steve says, "Get the F out of here, people were right," bringing up God. After 7 months, Steve has finally responded, but it's obvious that no one is impressed with his feeble comeback. In a recent interview, Steve went off on the haters once more, leading many to believe that he was specifically targeting Katt. He said that none of his haters were doing any better than him and threatened to deal with them physically if they brought up the subject again. As I've already mentioned, many believe that Steve's response is long overdue. He should have let out all of his anger back in January when the drama was still fresh, rather than now as we approach